Have you e'er had this thought in the quietest moment of your day? The thought that maybe the very thing you believe is keeping you safe, your need to control every outcome, every relationship, every step of your future, is actually the source of your deepest exhaustion. If that question lands with a quiet yes somewhere inside you, then stay here. Because what you're about to hear is not another lecture about trying harder. It's a doorway into a different way of being, seen through a lens of profound psychological insight, one that doesn't ask you to fight life, but to understand its currents. The most unsettling moment in life isn't when the storm hits. It's the moment you realize, with a chilling clarity, that you are standing in a river, gripping a stone at the riverbed with all your strength, convinced that holding on is what keeps you from being swept away. But the water is moving. It has always been moving, and your arms are trembling from the effort of staying in one place while the entire world flows around you. You ask yourself, why does my best effort feel like my greatest burden? Why does the map I trusted suddenly show me no roads? A Swiss psychiatrist named Carl Jung offered an answer that turns our modern instincts on their head. He suggested that anxiety is not your enemy. It is a messenger, a signal sent from the depths of your own psyche that you are attempting to command a force that was never meant to be commanded. It's the gentle, persistent strain in your chest, whispering that you are using an old key on a new lock. This conversation isn't about gaining more control. It's about recognizing a truth your soul already knows. The attempt to dictate life's flow is the very root of your inner turmoil. Are you ready to listen to a different kind of wisdom? Part 1. The strength in relinquishing the helm. Let's begin with a paradox that haunts high achievers and weary souls alike. Why is it that the more meticulously you plan, the more forcefully you strive to steer your life in a straight line, the more you feel a background hum of unease? Jung identified the core of this suffering with unflinching precision. He said, you cannot control life, and the endeavor to do so is not just futile, it is the genesis of psychological pain. Consider this. Let go is not a platitude. In Jung's framework, it is a precise psychological directive. Your conscious ego, the part of you that says I, operates like a captain who believes the ship must never deviate from the plotted course. It wants linear progress, predictable weather, and a destination visible on the horizon. But life is not an ocean chart. It is the ocean itself, with depths, tides, and currents that operate on a logic far older than any human plan. When the ego insists on commanding those tides, a profound friction arises. This friction has a name, anxiety. It appears not because you are failing, but because you are in conflict with a reality that does not bend to will alone. Jung observed, what you resist persists. The tighter your grip, the more life seems to slip through your fingers. The more you demand a specific outcome, the more reality seems to constrict around you. Here he introduces a concept often mistaken for passivity, surrender. Jungian surrender is not defeat. It is not apathy. It is the conscious decision to move from a posture of opposition to one of collaboration. Picture two sailors in a vast sea. The first, muscles locked, jaw clenched, fights against every wave, terrified of being off course. The second feels the same waves, adjusts the sails, but does not rage against the water itself. There is effort, but there is no war. The second sailor has not given up the voyage. They have given up the illusion that they command the sea. This is the critical distinction. Giving up is born of despair. It is the empty hand, the extinguished hope, Surrender, in the sense we speak of here, is born of profound awareness. It is the recognition that the ego is a valuable navigator, but not the ocean. It is the choice to relax a white-knuckled grip, not to let go of the wheel entirely. Those who surrender do not exit life. They enter it more fully, with a quality of presence that is open, receptive, and remarkably resilient. I've witnessed this pattern in countless stories. A person dedicates years to a linear career ladder, the right degree, the right promotion, the right timeline. Every delay is a personal failure. Every detour is a mistake. They live in a state of perpetual tension because life, in its organic way, keeps meandering. The exhaustion eventually becomes a threshold. When there is no strength left to fight the current, they finally stop, and in that stillness, they might begin to listen. Often it's in the unplanned detours that they discover work that ignites them, or connections that feel like home. The path was never straight. It was waiting for them to stop trying to straighten it. When you cease the futile effort to control every variable, life does not necessarily become easier externally, but it becomes profoundly lighter internally. You still act, you still choose, you still show up. The sole difference is that you are no longer carrying the impossible weight of predetermined outcomes. And as that weight dissolves, much of your anxiety dissolves with it. So if you are in a season where striving feels like sinking, ask yourself, is this a sign to push harder, or is it a signal, perhaps the first kind one you've received in a long time, to change your relationship with the current itself? Part 2. The exhaustion of swimming upstream. There is a subtle, almost imperceptible shift that occurs when you truly internalize that you cannot command life's flow. It's the moment you begin to feel, in your bones, just how much energy you have been expending, not on living, but on resisting. This resistance rarely looks dramatic. It looks like low-grade worry. It feels like a background vigilance that you must constantly do to prevent things from unraveling. It's a chronic tension in the shoulders of your soul. If the first step was the ego releasing the wheel, this is the realization that you've been swimming against the current for miles, and you are unbearably tired. In Jung's model, life is animated by a fundamental energy he called libido, not merely sexual, but the psychic fuel of all our desires, curiosities, growth, and even our necessary crises. This energy wants to move. It seeks expression, evolution, and flow. When you are aligned with its direction, life has a sense of fluidity, even when it's challenging. When you oppose it, the energy doesn't vanish. It becomes blocked. And what is anxiety, if not the sensation of a blocked stream trying to find its way? We often misattribute our anxiety to external things, the job, the finances, the relationship. Jung looked deeper. He saw anxiety as an internal tension that arises when part of you tries to remain static while the vital current of your own life has already changed direction. You cling to an old identity, a comfortable plan, a familiar harbor, but the libido, your own life force, has receded from that shore. It is pulling you toward a different horizon. Your anxiety is the strain of anchoring yourself to the past while the tide wants to carry you forward. Jung wrote a line that can change everything if you let it. Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. When you refuse to undergo the natural, legitimate pain of a transition, the grief of letting go, the uncertainty of the in-between, the discomfort of restructuring, your psyche creates a substitute, chronic, free-floating anxiety. It's a false pain. It doesn't help you move forward, but it prevents you from staying at peace. You are trapped in the eddy. Consider Anna, an architect who found herself physically recoiling at the sight of her drafting table. For years, it was her dream. Now it sparked a tightness in her chest, a mental fog. She tried every technique to manage the anxiety, new routines, new diets, new mindfulness apps. The harder she tried to fix the feeling, the more power it seemed to have. Only when she sat one morning, utterly unable to begin, did she admit the quiet truth. Her passion, her libido had left this vocation. Her sense of duty and a proud ego were keeping her in the chair. When she finally allowed herself to step away, to enter a fallow period of not knowing, the anxiety didn't just lessen, it transformed. Not because her problems were solved, but because she had stopped fighting the current that was already carrying her elsewhere. Jung spoke of a state called conjunctio, emerging. It is when the conscious ego stops seeing itself as separate from the larger movement of the unconscious and of life itself. You are no longer trying to impose your small will upon the universe, nor are you collapsing into helplessness. You are participating. You are listening. You are adjusting your stroke to the water. Imagine standing in that river. The current quickens. Instinct says, plant your feet, fight, resist. But the river is stronger. The struggle only ensures you slip, swallow water, and panic. The one who understands flow does something counterintuitive. They lean back. They let the water support them. They move with it, navigating from a place of cooperation rather than conflict. The event itself may not change, but your relationship to it changes everything. The message here is deceptively simple. Though the ego will protest, resist less, many things will resolve not through your forced intervention, but through your intelligent allowance. Not every life question demands an immediate, forceful answer. Some seasons simply ask you to stop swimming upstream, to stop demanding that you feel okay in the old way. When you do, a spaciousness emerges. The flow of your own existence begins to do its restorative work. Slowly, quietly, precisely, you can breathe again. This isn't a miracle. It is you returning to your own natural rhythm. If you've ever had a moment where you loosened your grip, even slightly, and felt the world become lighter, share one word in the comments below. Just one word that captures that feeling. Your word might be the very signal someone else needs to hear to stop fighting their own current. Part 3. Release as the psyche's ancient wisdom. As you begin to sense this more natural rhythm, you approach a deeper layer of Jung's insight. What you experience as loss or failure is often the unconscious psyche performing a necessary act of self-healing. Letting go from this vantage is not something you do so much as something you allow, a built-in wise process that protects you from what has finished its purpose in your story. Jung believed the unconscious is a self-regulating system, always seeking balance and wholeness. One of its primary methods is to withdraw energy or libido from aspects of your life that no longer serve your growth. When a role has taught its lesson, when a relationship has fulfilled its arc, when an old version of you has reached its limit, the unconscious quietly begins to reclaim the vitality it once invested there. There is no fanfare, no announcement. It is as silent as light fading from a room at dusk. The ego misinterprets this withdrawal. It senses the dwindling passion and calls it failure. It feels the emerging emptiness and labels it loss. But the unconscious is not punishing you. It is pruning you. It is making space. Jung said, the unconscious is not only the source of trouble, but also the source of the highest good. What feels like an ending may be the psyche gently pushing you away from a completed chapter so you can turn the page. Nature understands this intuitively. A forest doesn't cling to dead leaves. It lets them fall, decompose, and become the nutrient-rich soil for new growth. The tree does not mourn the leaf. It participates in the cycle. Humans, however, often panic. When the unconscious withdraws energy from a job, a dream, or a connection, we frantically try to pump life back into it. We grasp, we strive, we pretend. But what has completed its purpose cannot be revived. It can only be released so that what is meant to emerge can find fertile ground. Take Clara, who found herself in a relationship that was, by all external metrics, fine. No conflict, no betrayal. Yet over time, a hollow silence grew between the words. Time together felt heavy, depleting. She told herself it was a phase. She tried harder to feel what she once felt, but the effort only deepened her exhaustion. One evening, in that quiet heaviness, she saw the truth not as a catastrophe, but as a completion. Her life energy had departed this bond, not because of fault, but because its work was done. The grief she felt was real, but beneath it, once she stopped resisting, was a profound peace. She wasn't falling apart, she was being rearranged. This process is mirrored in the ancient myth of Persephone. Her descent into the underworld brought winter, a season where life appears to withdraw, to die back. But winter is not a punishment. It is a necessary phase of the cycle. It is the time of composting, of rest, of unseen preparation. Persephone's return each spring brings not just regrowth, but a new vitality, one that required the fallow period to emerge. Your periods of winter, when energy seems absent, are often the unconscious preparing the soil for a spring you cannot yet imagine. The unconscious is rarely mistaken. It withdraws energy only from what impedes your unfolding. But the ego, clinging to familiarity, interprets that withdrawal as a crisis. The message here is clear. You are not breaking. You are being renewed. Every release orchestrated by your deeper psyche opens the door to a life cycle that fits who you are becoming. When you find the courage to honor that timing, you may look back and see that what you called a winter was simply the beginning of a spring that was being prepared for you all along. Part 4. Fear as a missive from the unseen self. Once you start to see the unconscious as a guiding, restructuring force, you can begin to decipher a more unsettling signal. Your fear, what you experience as dread about the future, Jung proposed, often has little to do with what's ahead. It is, instead, an invitation from what he called the shadow, the repository of all the parts of yourself you've been taught to disown, repress, or ignore. The shadow is not evil. It is the unused, the unlived, the unhealed. It holds forgotten shames, old wounds, abandoned talents, and suppressed instincts. These elements don't disappear when you banish them from your conscious mind. They go underground, and from that hidden place they influence your emotions, reactions, and particularly your anxieties. Jung's famous dictum cuts to the core. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When you avoid your shadow, you live as if an invisible director is staging your life, often casting you in fearful roles you don't understand. The anxiety you feel about a future event is frequently not about the event itself. It is a past injury, masquerading as a future threat. A person terrified of public speaking isn't usually afraid of the audience. They are afraid of a childhood humiliation that lives in their nervous system. A person paralyzed by the fear of abandonment isn't fearing a future loss. They are reliving an ancient, unsoothed loneliness. Modern neuroscience echoes this. The amygdala, the brain's alarm center, cannot differentiate between a present danger and a traumatic memory. When an unhealed past wound is triggered, your body reacts as if the old danger is happening now. You sweat, your heart races, you freeze, all while your conscious mind is fixated on a future scenario. You are, in a very real sense, time traveling. The shadow uses the language of future fear. to talk about past pain, consider Alara, a brilliant consultant who consistently turned down leadership roles. The mere suggestion triggered physical panic. She told herself she feared the pressure, but in a moment of courageous introspection, she connected it to a memory of being 8 years old, her father's crushing disappointment etched on his face after a minor mistake. The shame of that moment, the belief that to be seen in authority was to risk devastating failure, had been buried for decades. Her fear wasn't of the promotion. It was of that 8-year-old being shamed all over again. The shadow was using her career to ask her to heal that young girl. From this perspective, anxiety is not a foe to be defeated. It is a courier. It delivers a message from a disowned part of yourself, saying, "Look here, something needs your attention." The future is not inherently dangerous. An unintegrated past is. Your fear is a compassionate, if unsettling, invitation to turn inward, to bring light to the darkened corner. When you dare to look, to name the old wound, its power to project terror onto tomorrow begins to dissolve. The shadow, when integrated, stops being a haunting and becomes a source of strength. The future ceases to be a minefield and becomes a landscape you can walk with a steadier heart. If, as you hear this, you sense a quiet knock from within, simply type the word "seen" in the comments. No story needed. That one word can be a powerful acknowledgement, a first step in turning toward the part of you that has been waiting in the wings. Part 5. The Quiet Domain, where direction emerges. After you begin to understand fear as a shadow's invitation, a subtle shift occurs within. A space of quiet begins to open up. Not an empty silence, but a fertile stillness. The noise of the ego's constant planning and worrying starts to settle, like dust in a sunlit room, and in that new quiet, you might touch a deeper layer of intelligence. Jung called this the domain of the self. The self, with a capital, is Jung's term for the central organizing principle of the entire psyche. It is the nucleus of your wholeness. It knows who you are at your core, what paths are congruent with your nature, and what seasons you are meant to weather. Unlike the noisy, commanding ego, the self does not shout, it whispers. It communicates through intuition, through a felt sense of rightness, through dreams, and through that quiet pull toward or away from things. You cannot hear its whisper when the ego is broadcasting at full volume. Jung put it beautifully: who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Anxiety often flourishes when your gaze is fixed outward, scanning for threats, obsessing over outcomes you cannot command. Peace germinates when you have the courage to look inward, to the subtle movements of the inner world where the self is already orchestrating your unfolding in ways your conscious mind cannot yet comprehend. Think of a mountain lake at dawn. When the wind is up, the surface is choppy, fractured, reflecting nothing clearly. But when the air grows still, the lake becomes a mirror for the entire sky, the clouds, the light, the vastness. The lake didn't do anything to achieve this clarity. It simply ceased being disturbed. Your mind is that lake. The ego's demands are the wind. When the mental chatter subsides, your inner clarity can reflect the wisdom that is always there. I recall a man named Leo, entangled in a web of personal and professional strain. His anxiety was a constant companion. He consumed every piece of self-help advice, every podcast, every technique to fix his life. The more he sought solutions, the more tangled his thoughts became. A friend offered a single counterintuitive suggestion: for 10 minutes each morning, sit. Do not try to fix anything. Do not analyze. Just watch your breath come and go. The first few days were agonizing. The noise felt louder. But by the 5th day, Beneath the chaos, he touched a layer of stillness he had forgotten existed. It held no answers, but it held a profound assurance, a gentle, unshakable sense that he was being guided. His rational mind still saw the problems, but the panic had lifted like a fog. He hadn't solved a single external issue. He had simply made space to hear the whisper of the self again. Neuroscience aligns with this. Practices that induce calm, like deep, slow breathing, activate the prefrontal cortex, the seat of wise judgment, and quiet the amygdala, the fear. Stillness is not just spiritual. It is a biological recalibration. What Jung called listening to the self is what happens when your nervous system shifts from reactivity to receptivity. If you wish to approach this, start with the simplest of gates. For a few minutes, just observe. Observe the breath without changing it. Observe thoughts as they pass, like clouds. Observe emotions as sensations in the body, without needing to fix them. In this act of observation, you step back from the ego's drama. You create a gap, and in that gap, the self can begin to make its presence known. The ultimate message of this section is gentle but transformative. When you are silent, the path reveals itself. You don't have to force it, or strive for it, or worry it into existence, because what guides you is not a frightened, linear mind, but the deep, implicit wisdom of your own totality. And as you start to trust that whisper, you'll uncover an even more profound realization. Not everything that falls apart in your life is a mistake. Some of what you label as failure is simply life's secret language, rearranging your journey toward wholeness. Part 6. The hidden architecture within every setback. This leads us to a cornerstone of mature understanding. Life is not random. Even in what appears as chaos, there is often a hidden architecture, a restructuring intelligence at work. This is a difficult truth to accept because it asks us to reconsider one of our greatest fears, failure. In the Jungian view, what the ego experiences as a crushing defeat is often the unconscious intervening to redirect you from a path that has served its purpose and is now hindering your growth. We are culturally conditioned to see failure as proof we are on the wrong track. Jungian psychology suggests it can be the very signal that you are being tracked, guided away from a direction that no longer fits the person you are becoming. The ego hates this. It feels humiliation, shame, a blow to its identity, but the unconscious may be using the collapse of one plan to create the space for a truer one to emerge. Jung noted, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Failure is often the precise form that painful but necessary awakening takes. Consider the story of a visionary, not through the lens of triumph, but through the lens of redirection. Steve Jobs' ousting from Apple was a profound public failure. His ego was shattered, his identity as a leader demolished. In that wilderness period, however, a hidden order was activated. He founded nuanced, he invested in Pixar, and most crucially, he underwent a deep period of personal and professional reassessment. When he returned to Apple, he returned not just with new ideas, but as a man who had been psychologically restructured. The failure didn't destroy his path. It was the crucible that forged the path he was meant to walk. You need not have a story of that scale to recognize the mechanism. I think of a ceramic artist named Mara. She saved for years to open her own studio, pouring her soul into the vision. 6 months after opening, a global pandemic forced its closure. Debts mounted. The dream seemed shattered. In that abyss of failure, stripped of her business plan, she returned to the wheel not to produce for a market, but because the clay was the only thing that still felt real. In that raw, unpressured space, She developed a style she'd never before dared, a style that, years later, defined her acclaimed work. The failure didn't end her artistic journey. It burned away the commercial constraints so her authentic artistic voice could emerge. This is the hidden order in action. It dissolves situations where your time has expired. It collapses plans that were born from an old self. You experience it as loss. The unconscious enacts it as course correction. You do not need to perceive the blueprint for it to be operative. Some of the most pivotal stages of your development are orchestrated during periods that, on the surface, look purely like breakdown. When you truly absorb this, the fear of failure begins to lose its paralyzing grip. You realize you are not being punished by a chaotic universe. You are being guided by an intelligent inner process. Not every closed door is a blockade. Often it is life itself saying, gently but firmly, this way is no longer for you. Turn around. Failure does not close your doors. It closes the doors that were never truly yours. What feels like an ending may be the necessary preparation for a chapter your soul has been composing all along. If these words allow you to view a past or present setback with slightly softer eyes, take a breath. Inhale for 3 seconds, hold for 3, exhale for 6. Let that breath be an act of trust. Trust that you are being led toward a horizon wider than your current sight allows. Part 7. The new map requires an empty hand. Finally, we arrive at a liberating, if challenging, truth. Your anxiety often peaks not because life is against you, but because you are clutching an old map while standing in new territory. The ego, terrified of the uncharted, clings to what once worked, what once provided safety and validation. But the map is not the territory. And when the territory has shifted, as it constantly does in a living, growing life, the old map becomes a source of confusion and dread. Jung understood this deeply. We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become. But to become, you must be willing to release the familiar story of who you were. The unconscious doesn't live in the past. It is dynamically oriented toward your present and future wholeness. When a particular mindset, goal, or self-concept has outlived its usefulness, the unconscious withdraws its energy from it. The feeling of that withdrawal, it's often the anxiety you're trying to manage. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that your inner guidance system is saying, this navigational chart is obsolete. It is time to sense your way forward with a different kind of knowing. The clearest metaphor is this: you are navigating the vibrant, complex streets of a new city, but you are desperately trying to follow a map of your old hometown. Of course you feel lost. Of course nothing aligns. The anxiety isn't because the city is dangerous. It's because the tool you're using cannot decipher the reality before you. Only when you fold up that old paper and put it in your pocket can you begin to look up, to see the actual landmarks, to feel the direction of the wind, to ask for directions, to receive the new map, which is less a drawn document and more an embodied sense of the way. I knew someone who carried a map that read, "To be loved, you must be endlessly helpful and never a burden." This map served her as a child in a chaotic home. In her adult relationships, it became a prison. She built friendships on exhausting service and felt deep anxiety whenever she had a personal need. She believed she was flawed at intimacy. The truth was, her map of connection was antiquated. When she dared to set it down, to risk being seen as needy, she found, to her astonishment, that love could meet her in her vulnerability. A new map of mutual care had space to form in her empty hands. This is the Jungian state of allowing. The deepest core of you is perpetually adjusting your trajectory toward greater alignment. The old map feels safe because it's known. The new path feels alive because it is true. The bridge between them is release. To receive new guidance, your hands must be open. Your anxiety, in so many cases, is just the quiet alarm, reminding you that you're navigating with a legend that no longer corresponds to your soul's terrain. When you release the old map, clarity doesn't always come instantly. There can be a foggy, disorienting interval, but within that fog, your other senses sharpen. You start to notice intuitive nudges, synchronicities, a quiet yes or no in your gut. This, Jung would say, is the authentic voice of life, communicating through the self. Life always has a next step for you, but you must be willing to let go of the last step to feel the ground beneath your feet now. Letting go is not failure. It is the essential act of making room for the intelligence of your own journey to guide you. And when you find the courage to stop controlling the storyline, you realize something breathtaking. Life was never your adversary. It was only ever waiting for you to release the map you had outgrown, so you could finally see the landscape you were meant to explore. When you reach the end of this exploration, you might sense a simple shift. Life never asked you to command it. It only ever invited you to be present, fully, courageously present. Every wave of anxiety that ever washed over you was not a sign of your fragility. It was an invitation, a gentle, persistent knock on the door of your awareness, asking you to step out of the old control room and onto the deck of the ship, to feel the wind, to watch the stars, to trust that the vessel of your being knows how to navigate deep waters. If what you've heard here today brings a moment of calm, a sense of permission to live a little lighter, that is not an accident. Perhaps you have arrived at a juncture where your own psyche is whispering, stop gripping, start breathing, stop fearing the weather, start sensing the direction.